In today's video, we have a very exciting one for you guys. Not only is precipitation finally expected for the eastern United States, I know it's been a long time coming and it's much needed, so that's very good news. But we also have some cold air potentially on the way that we're seeing these models picking up on. So our first signs of cold here in November and precipitation. We also have a lot of snowfall for the Rockies. A tropical cyclone that we're tracking. Hopefully that one's going to break up before hitting the US coast. So we have a lot of things to discuss today. Let's just dive into things and take a look here at the upcoming pattern. And first things first, we're looking at this afternoon on Tuesday, November 5th. We do see snowfall occurring here throughout the Rockies, some of the Cascades as well here in Washington and Oregon. We see Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Utah, Colorado all seeing some pretty decent snowfall as we speak. We do have a low pressure center located over Wisconsin with a dragging cold front with a warm front out ahead of it as well. So this is bringing the very warm weather to the Ohio Valley, Great Lakes, up the East Coast through the Southeast, Mid-Atlantic, and Northeast. And we do see some severe weather happening along this cold front boundary. Typically, you would expect to see when we have this cold, dry air diving in and warm, humid air kind of surging northward out ahead of it. You would expect to see severe weather and even tornadic activity happening along that line. Unfortunately, that's been ongoing for a couple of days, and it is not really expected to slow down yet. We do see by tomorrow afternoon on Wednesday that will break up, though. Our original low kind of moves up, it weakens, and it heads over towards New England. And we have some precipitation around for the eastern United States, but it's relatively weak at this point. We do have an intense tropical cyclone hitting the western tip of Cuba. This is generally expected to head kind of northwestly. And we're going to see that overall kind of break up as it approaches the Gulf Coast. So this should not be a very intense system as it is likely arriving to the Gulf Coast. Thankfully, there's a lot of shear, so a lot of just instability or stability and just really crazy winds happening at different levels that break up these storms. And thankfully, the top is kind of going to get sheared off. When those winds at the top are stronger than the lower winds, or even going the opposite direction of those lower winds, we see that oftentimes break up storms, and that's exactly what's happening here. We do continue to see the precipitation here. We see the snowfall for the Four Corner states continuing, and that's not going to end anytime soon. As we head towards Thursday afternoon on November 7th, we actually see that getting worse for New Mexico, Colorado, and even touching a bit of Texas, Oklahoma, and Kansas there. We see very heavy snowfall, especially for eastern Colorado and northeastern New Mexico. Meanwhile, we have a pretty intense tropical cyclone still right there in kind of the southeastern Gulf of Mexico. But again, this is going to dissipate. It's not going to look that way for a while, but that is kind of the expectation at this point. The southeast continues to see precipitation around, which is good news. We do see by Friday on November 8th, this tropical cyclone is continuing to intensify north of the Yucatan Peninsula, but wait for it, we're going to see it dissipate on this model run. We do see the continued snowfall for Colorado and New Mexico, a new surge of precipitation for Kansas, Oklahoma, and Texas. This could bring some more thunderstorms and severe weather with it, so we'll be watching for that to perhaps continue. By Saturday afternoon, finally we see this precipitation moving out and northward as it's kind of just sat there for days. We do see snowfall for Wyoming and Colorado especially, and then we see showery activity, maybe even some thunderstorms here for the plains and down through the Midwest. Now we see this low pressure center in the middle of the Gulf finally weakening. It went from like a 968 all the way up to a 990, so this is rapidly now de-intensifying. So we see this really weakening. We see the Northwest dealing with some precipitation, mostly snowfall up here for Canada. And then as you move down to the United States, we see a lot of rainfall, especially if you're in the lower elevations. Some of those northern Cascades are seeing snowfall from this. As we just keep on going, as we always do, Sunday on November 10th, look at this, 1001, it's down or up 11 millibars, so it's weakening very quickly as it's approaching that Gulf Coast. Thankfully, this is ultimately the best outcome we could have expected or hoped for here, seeing this storm really want to weaken before it approaches the United States. It could bring some much needed precipitation, though, to some of the Gulf states and up the southeast perhaps. Meanwhile, we do have some storminess kind of moving into that area as we speak as well for Sunday, so very good news there. Overall, your jet stream is ridging over the east, slight trough over the Rockies, and we do see some snowfall happening here for Wyoming. Let's go ahead and take a look at Monday afternoon on the 11th, and this is when things start to look very interesting. First off, we get a huge surge of storms for the Northwest. Snowfall taking over for the Cascades and Northern Rockies here. Again, very heavy in some spots as well. We have a couple of low pressure centers, a weaker one up here near the Canadian Rockies, and then a stronger one down here for Wyoming. And we are pretty much left with a mixed bag of precipitation up here in the Northwest, but very intense regardless of where you're at, and snowfall will depend on your elevation. Meanwhile, we continue to see sporadic precipitation here throughout the East Coast. This is going to, again, overall be good news. We're continuing to see precipitation move into this area, and we're going to be watching for a cool down coming soon after this point into the eastern states. Your jet stream, right as we speak here, is kind of meandering around the United States, but we should see a dip in the east take place here very, very soon. Tuesday the 12th, it doesn't look like it's moving in that direction yet, but again, trust me, it will. We do see a low taking place across the plains. Your jet stream is troughing over the west, ridging slightly over the east. It's not the warmest in the world, but there is some warmer air moving up from the Gulf, and this will bring some showers and thunderstorms to the deeper south areas. Snowfall happening for a lot of the Rockies and Cascades out here. By the time we reach Wednesday, it's clear what is going to occur. We see this kind of low pressure center that takes place over the Midwest. It moves way up into the upper Midwest or even south central Canada as a 985, a very intense system. It develops a dragging cold front here, and it wants to develop a warm front out to the east here. So we see the surging warmth and precipitation up the East Coast. We also get a warm-up starting up here for the West Coast, especially the Southwest. Higher pressure also around. I'm going to underline those. And this is causing a ridge to develop over the west, which is really intensifying this trough, and we should see this all move eastward. We also have some northwest activity once again, rainfall for the Cascades and the overall Pacific Northwest, but the Rockies seeing a lot of snowfall here by Wednesday the 13th. As we move towards Thursday on the 14th, this is what we end up getting. A 987 here over eastern Canada, 1,000 millibar down there for New England, and overall a huge cold front boundary up and down the East Coast with heavy precipitation from Florida up through Maine. This is so needed and such good news. We see the jet stream is ridging over the west, as we mentioned, troughing big time over the east and bringing some of that first Arctic air of November at least by about Thursday the 14th here. Meanwhile, we have, again, very mild air taking place across the west. This doesn't hinder the snowfall for the northern Rockies or northern Cascades, though. We do see some storms kind of skirting along that jet stream, and this is bringing some precipitation out there as well. Let's just move the next few hours after that, and what we see is this trough is now centered over the East Coast for Friday the 15th. This would bring very cold temperatures, and we see this warm up is spreading eastward as well, so this could stick around. It could move out. We'll have to wait and see, but we see snow showers taking place throughout eastern Canada, some of the upper Midwest, and even the Northeast and Mid-Atlantic. So very, very early signs of winter here in the east if this does take place such as that. If we look at the precipitation here, what we see is a lot for the Northwest, inches of precipitation. Also the south central states as we get these kind of storms really, really slowly moving through these areas. And then the East Coast, look at this. Inches of precipitation for this area as well. This is going to be above average precipitation for a lot of these East Coast areas. So let's look at it, and this is great news. We see above average for many folks here in the East, many folks here in the Pacific Northwest, and many folks here in the South Central states, with below average for the Southwest, which is common in these La Nina years. Some of the Midwest and Northeast here also experiencing very, very slightly below normal precipitation, but overall above normal precipitation is occurring where we've seen very dry conditions for weeks or even months here. This is just great. Let's take a look here at the total snowfall, and we see gargantuan amounts for the Cascades and throughout the Rockies, especially the southern Rockies though. So the Cascades, we're seeing feet of snowfall. Northern Rockies, we're seeing feet. And then kind of New Mexico and Colorado here, where we see that heavy snowfall just lingering. We're seeing maybe 3, 4, 5 feet of snowfall there. So just absolutely insane amounts expected. And look at this here in Nevada, very dry. We get almost nothing. Dusting, if anything, there picked up on this model. So very interesting. We also see a few inches perhaps for the upper Midwest, the very upper Midwest, and the Northeast as well. The interior Northeast maybe seeing a dusting to maybe an inch or two. So we're starting to see some central and eastern states get in on some of this snowfall as that cold air spreads eastward. This will allow for this type of thing to occur. Temperature pattern. I'm sure all of you are curious about this. Right where it sits now, we see cold in the west, warm in the east. And it's going to stay that way for a while, as you can see, all the way through likely the 10th at least. And then we start to see the movement here. This is the 12th, 13th. We see that surge of warmth out ahead of that cold front. But look at this. We start to warm along the west, and this forces all of this cold air to start really racing eastward. And we're going to see the east cool down in a big way here in just a second. So let's just move towards that afternoon, or evening, better yet. This is 1 a.m. on Friday, November 5th, or 15th, better yet. And we see very, very cold air along most of the eastern states, with below normal temperature, or above normal temperatures, better yet, for most of the west and north central states here. So definitely a big sign that things could be changing down the road. It's good to see these models picking up on that. As we take a look at the 7-day graphical tropical weather outlook, we do have Tropical Storm Rafael there right around Jamaica. Again, that is expected to hit near western Cuba. We also have this area here that has a 10% chance of development over the next 48 hours and a 30% chance of development over the next 7 days. I'm a little bit doubtful. The National Hurricane Center has been pointing this area out for many days now, but really we've not seen anything come of it. So we'll see what happens with that. Here is the cone forecast for Rafael, and we see that this one is expected to become a hurricane, again striking the western areas of Cuba, remaining a hurricane until it's north of the Yucatan Peninsula there, and then weakening through the weekend. So Friday, Saturday, Sunday, back down to a tropical storm. Might not even hit the coast of the United States as a tropical storm at all. That would be really, really good news. But this could be a big rainmaker for Texas, Louisiana, Mississippi, maybe even Alabama or Florida. We'll have to wait and see on that. Anyway, guys, thank you so much for watching this video. Be sure to subscribe. We'll keep you guys up to date with all these things regarding the precipitation, the temperatures, the tropics. You can even hit the bell icon for daily notifications when we upload so you never miss one. Be sure to like the video if you did enjoy it. Leave a comment down below, and I'll see you guys in the next video.